All right, peace and blessings, everybody. Want to start with an icebreaker, get the things going with a lyric, see if everybody can figure it out. Uh, I got love for my brother, but we can never go nowhere unless we share with each other. We got to start making changes, learn to see me as a brother instead of two distant strangers.
Say it
Yeah,
one more time.
I know that one.
Yeah. I got love for my brother, but we can never go nowhere unless we share with each other. We got to start making changes, learn to see me as a brother instead of two distant strangers.
Oh yeah, that's Nas.
Nah,
Mm.
No,
nah, that's the goat.
that's Jay.
Nah,
Who is the goat? That's the goat to me.
that's that. That's Pac, man. That's
The
changes.
part. Oh, changes. You right.
Yeah,
You
yeah,
right.
yeah.
Yeah, you right. That is the goat.
Yeah, that's a good one.
That
That's a
is
Yeah,
the
I
good
goat.
one.
felt that. Yeah, I definitely felt like that lyric was appropriate for this evening's topic of discussion. And this is my first time jumping on the podcast, so it's a blessing to build with you brothers. We've been working together for over the last year or so, trying to make this thing happen, and we have a lot of exciting things right around the corner. But to be in this space where we could talk about why when we got involved with it, or our vision for the land and how it impacts the community, that's everything to legacy in more ways than one. So uh, Crondo blessed me with the ability to think of some topics for tonight's discussion. And the first one that I want to touch on is about healing and resilience through land connection. Um, so the specific question is, how can reconnecting with the land serve as a form of healing and resilience for our people, especially people who are located down in Phoenix, who grew up in urban communities? They never see what it's like to get outside that concrete jungle. If we create a space for them, what's that mean as far as, healing?
Hmm.
Anybody want to touch on that first?
So how can reconnecting with the land serve as a form of healing and resilience? I think my personal opinion, it makes you start looking at life from a different lens, like as far as ownership and ownership. Part of my language, but ownership. A lot of us don't really think in that mind frame. We're always on the defense. You know what I'm saying? We're always trying to, let me not shine too bright, or let me not be too loud, or let my color not speak too loud. And I think reconnecting with land and that ownership vibe, it can basically send us on a different trajectory, in my opinion. And I think that's where the healing comes from, and that's where the resilience of building on that land, starting something from scratch. Um, because at the same time, we are in that microwave age, and everybody wants, what I mean, instant results and instant gratification. Um, so being that we have land and there's literally nothing on it, it is teaching us patience, and it
Yeah.
is teaching us resilience, because we have to move at a certain pace, and we have to move um, methodically and accordingly with what we're able to do with our time and finances. So I think it can serve as a form of healing and resilience in those aspects.
I agree with that 1,000%.
Yeah, that was well
1,000%.
said. I agree. I think it gives people somewhat of a fresh start. Many of us are in our infancy in terms of this level of ownership, especially if it's a vacant space. It kind of requires you to not only tap into your creativity, but prioritizing things in real time. Um, especially when you consider necessities such as utilities and things of that nature that we may take for granted, as far as like the infrastructure already being here for us, like
Hmm.
in the inner cities.
Hmm.
It just forces you to really tap into some of those things that you just never gave too much thought into. And I think, considering that it's a learning process, you break that up into small pieces. And the great thing about doing it with a collective is that it's not overwhelming, especially if those in the collective are at a similar um, proficiency as you. So it's a journey. It becomes a journey. So I think that in itself can take your mental away from the typical day to day grind, hamster wheel type thing, rat race type concept. And yeah,
Yeah.
it's beneficial, especially when you're able to get a solid like grip on the contrast between what that existence is and what you come back to in the city. I think it gives you a greater appreciation for the simple things.
Yeah, yeah, both those answers were spot on. And one of the things that stood out to me was the collective, to your point. When we are working together, when we're building with other brothers and sisters, that nourishes us, spiritually. That's where the healing comes from, in my opinion. And also, I think just reconnecting with the land in general, I feel that the source of our power, the source of our energy and our momentum and our spirit comes from our ancestors. So when we can reconnect with the land, we get to tap into that ancestor, that was doing that type of work before, right? There was someone that came before you that did agriculture. There was someone that came before you that was a builder. There was someone that came before you that did art, that worked with the community, and you're tapping into that. And when we went up there a while back, and we had our shoes off, and we just grounded in the soil, and we connected, that means something, and that starts to get um, the right mindset and the right choices flowing the right way for us to start, building something that could be a village that lasts. And there's a lot of tradition that we can start. We're in the process of village engineering, and we get to start that tradition. Every time we take these young men up to the space, we can have them plant a tree. We can have them put their hands into concrete. We can have them do something that is part of the rites of passage, for that space. And I think that that's healing not only for us who, have ownership in the land, but all the other people who are going to be contributing to the space. I think everybody's going to benefit from it. All right, so let me segue to the next uh, topic, unless anybody else got something to jump on.
What do you think when we put the foot on the land, and what do you how do you think, what kind of impact that had spiritually?
When we put our feet in the land, like when we like take our shoes off and we actually put our feet in there. Yeah. So man, I could go down a rabbit hole with that. There's so many different things from uh, a kung fu standpoint, with energy. Grounding is no joke. When you talk to farmers, people who are in agriculture, when you put your hands and your feet into the soil, the minerals and the metals and the connection with the earth itself, it centers you, and it's therapeutic. And therapists and doctors recommend that you do work outdoors, in the sun, and particularly in the soil, so that you could, relieve stress. It helps with blood pressure. It helps with your mental alignment. But then some people are divine creatures, like, as Black people, man, that's our thing. We just need to be still enough and be at the right brainwave and that theta, so that we could connect with our ancestors and hear what our next steps are. So when you connect with the soil, that is no joke. And I think some of the members aren't one of y'all related to the land. You have ancestral roots to the land. Kylan, were you mentioning that before when we're up at this space?
Well, so yeah, in a way. So my grandfather, he purchased land near the area where we're centered. I'd say what, maybe, I don't know, 60 miles away.
Mm,
In the town of Holbrook, when Holbrook was kind of forecasted to be like the next bubbling city, and this would have been mid 20th century, right? So all of that changed. when Route 66, the historic Route 66, no longer had the same significance that it once had. So with the advent of Highway 40 in particular, that kind of took, I guess, like that potential away from that particular area. So
Hmm.
he didn't, he didn't do too much land development in that area. He just kind of held on to a little plot, just a little over an acre, which I now possess. For a period of time. But
Yeah.
as far as like direct lineage, aside from that, I mean, I'm not sure. That's the interesting thing about Black Americans, right? We can only go so far back. So it's
Right.
like the great mystery, and I think it speaks to the identity crisis that some of us wrestle with. But the thing that I do know for certain, in a broader sense, I do identify with the ancestral how can I say the ancestral entitlement to the soil that we're on, just considering all the blood, sweat, and tears that have gone into this particular land in America. I mean, when you consider, Crispus Attucks taking the first bullet, we our people have fought in every war, literally built the economic engine in this country, and so on and so on. We can go and chronicle all the different inventions that are standards today, and that's all a result of our ancestors and their ingenuity.
Yeah.
So I don't overlook that. I definitely have a great deal of admiration for the ethnic roots in Africa, and going there was life changing, and I think it's good to establish that connection. But I definitely don't want to overlook like the historical significance of our more immediate ancestors that were right here on this soil.
Yeah, 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 yeah. Spot on, spot on. I mean, there's so many things that we need to get reconnected to, from relearning our farming techniques, growing our own food, which I didn't think about earlier, but when we grow our own food, it heals us, right? Like when you plant your own food and you eat your own food on the land that you're living on, it's more nutritional for you and your children that stay on the land, right? Even with the honey, we were talking about getting into beekeeping on the space. Local honey is therapeutic, right? Because it helps you fight off the pollens that are in that particular area. So when we start growing food on a large scale, it's going to be healing and nourishing to us, and just reconnecting with those practices of how to make those herbal medicines. Any type of bonfire ritual we have, anything that we do when we have our celebrations, our concerts, all those things. I think that is going to start to pull us all together. And then economically, there's a whole nother thing to that. But I won't jump the gun. I'll just
Hey,
roll into the next. Yeah,
I got a quick question because we're
yeah,
talking about healing, and that concept is, it's a common narrative these days, in terms of how people need to heal, whether it be relationships or just mentalities. How does one know, in your opinion, how does one know if they are healing or if they have healed from a particular trauma or some particular like detrimental mentality that they may have?
yeah, yeah. That's a really good question, brother. And I would say a wise person would say that they are never healed, that they're always in the process of healing, right?
Mm.
That any person who suffered any type of addiction or trauma, the mantra is always take it one day at a time. You should not even focus on the end result, but rather just focus on the power of now and what's occurring at the moment. And right now, if you look at what's happening, typically there are no problems or issues right now. You know what I mean? You can just focus on what's in your best interest mentally, physically, and spiritually. You can nourish that with active intention at that moment. And I don't think that you ever get to the point where you can say, "Oh, well, I'm good. Let me go about my business and not be vigilant," right? Because I think the mantra of always saying one day at a time makes you have your head on the swivel to make sure that you're looking for ways to heal wounds, to unpack things, because you don't really know that you have a wound or something's going on until you get into a conflict with somebody else. Hurt people, and it's very difficult for you to even find what your triggers are. And those triggers or those pain points can happen with relationships. They can happen when you're in a workspace dealing with somebody trying to give you direction. It can be an issue with you trying to, build with your brothers and sisters. Even with this land, we can have discourse. Things are not always going to be wonderful and gravy all the time. And when we have that conflict, we have to ask ourselves, well, what wound is still going on that needs to be healed? So that's a powerful question, but I think the wisest answer is that, it's always a constant healing process. Matter of fact, if you want to get down to the nitty grit, we are always in the process of decay, right? As a being, you are constantly shedding dead cells. You're dying every single second, every single moment. You are dying, but you're regenerating at the same rate. And depending on your diet and your mentality, you could regenerate in such a way where you slow down the aging process. So, very powerful question.
Indeed. Yeah, I like the way you broke that down. Um, so I know we also intended to talk about some of the barriers that kind of keep people from getting into these spaces. And
Mhm.
I think the I think the biggest one, I mean, capital is always a consideration, but I think the biggest one is just like the fear of the unknown, you know,
Mhm.
and that obviously doesn't just apply here, but that it kind of perpetuates a hesitancy to keep you from taking that first step, right? Um,
Right.
or wanting to be perfect on a particular venture at the beginning, and I think that's like highly unlikely with any particular effort, right? So I think to, for lack of better words, the once you decide, I mean, the rest is just going through those motions of execution. But I think the pivotal point is this: when you decide, everything originates as a thought. Um, what do you think about that? About barriers into these kind of
Yeah, yeah,
ventures?
yeah. I mean, let's just touch on what you're talking about right there about the fear of the unknown,
Hmm.
and just fear in general. It's not even about the fact that you don't know that you can claim land, because some people don't even realize how straightforward the process can be if they just start pursuing, okay, what's next? Okay, we got a checklist, and what's next? And you just keep, putting one foot in front of the other. Eventually, you could procure land for you and your family or your peoples or however large you want to make it. But I think part of that fear is also we're not necessarily comfortable just walking into any space either. So the land that's available normally is in rural country. And the way this country is devised, most people of color, especially Black people, we are in the inner cities, in the metropolises, right? We're stacked on top of each other. We are growing up in a space where everything is already built around you, and it's really hard for us to see an empty canvas and imagine what it would be like to build something here, to create something there. It changes the way you think about the world around you when you grow up in a space where everything's already built. Now you're trying to figure out how you can fit into that space as opposed to how you can create on that space. So fear is real powerful. And um, not everybody feels comfortable going into certain country areas where traditionally we're not wanted, right? Because of
Yeah.
redlining, and if we move into a space, property value suddenly plummets. So it's not even, I'm not even trying to say that all people who are acting viciously towards us are doing it, because they were raised to, or because that's just in their nature. But it might just be economic. They are jerks and a-holes, mainly because they're trying to get us off their territory so that they can keep their property value going. And the system is rigged that way, so it forces them to think that way. And then you
Right.
have all the other extreme elements, especially in Arizona. This is one of the highest concentrated states as far as, extreme hate groups, right? You
Mm.
have extreme right wing groups that are out there practicing militia drills, and they're putting in work because they think that one day it might be anarchy to their benefit where they get to reset everything and make America great again, that type of thing, So we have to be um, on our P's and Q's, and we have to have our head on the swivel. But for most people, that's too much fear to deal with moving into those spaces. Is it worth it? So when we start looking at land, we're finding things that are available on the outskirts of the city so that we feel safe and comfortable, right? We're not finding like 40 acres of land, 100 acres of land right next door to the city because the values many times is out of reach. Um, but to your point, I think that was spot on what you were saying earlier. One other thing that I would add is, we have lending practices in this country that make it pretty hard for us to own land or get access to it, unless you lived a life where you were financially stable, you understood credit, you were able to keep, your uh, personal accounting the way it was, I mean, the way it should be. Most people are not able to get loans. And even when things are spot on, it's even more difficult to get the loan necessary to buy land, which is why I think is brilliant on what we're doing right now as far as setting a blueprint for collective economics, for us to be able to come together and individually, we may not be able to easily purchase sizable land like that, but collectively, not only can we get that land, but we could actually do some powerful work on it, and build on it much faster, and start something beautiful with our families, So I'm excited about it, but uh, yeah, barriers in land ownership is all about economic power,
Nice.
and the people who lord it over us. You know what I mean? The gatekeepers to that.
Yeah,
I think
I
that.
think I'm sorry to cut you.
Okay.
You brought up a good point, and I just want to expound on some of the work that could be done out there, right? So, aside from just merely owning the space or having some kind of stake in it, um, I would encourage the listeners to think about some of the activities or some of the initiatives that could be facilitated in those spaces. So, quick plug. I feel like this is the perfect time to talk about the legacy camp that we have coming up in a couple of weeks, where
Mhm.
essentially we are providing an opportunity for 20 young men to venture out into the area with us. And basically get away from the city in so many words, right? Unplug and
Mhm.
tap into camping, hiking, breath work, some of that manual labor that you were talking about, getting your hands into the soil, a
Mhm.
brief one-on-one session on concrete, and how to work it, what it is, that type of thing. So can you talk about the significance of those efforts as well?
Oh yeah, 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 definitely. Many of us in the growth spot, we have experience with mentorship. You yourself, you had an amazing archery mentorship in Phoenix that expose young people to things that they may not normally get exposure to. And, it's about broadening everybody's horizons and their mindsets. And like I said, many of us have experience with mentorships. I have experience with Fight for Life, No Excuses, the Sons Manhood Program, just working with the youth. And when we get young people in a space where they're dealing with other men, especially when we're talking about young men specifically. But when we could put them around other male role models that are actually doing the work, that is, trying to create something that's not selfish, but that gives back to the community, they see that, and it starts to change their mindset, right? It's just planting a little seed in their mind where they see themselves as leaders, as creators, right? And that matters. And even more so, if you want to go back to like, Yoruba or West Africa, and how rites of passages used to work, and still do. And there's tribes that still do it to this day, right? I don't want to make it seem like this is ancient history. These practices are still in place, but with rites of passages, it's supposed to be a transformational experience. Typically they would take that child away from the village, right? Away from the comfort of the mothers, away from the comfort of that town that they're familiar with, and take them deep into the woods or the forest or the mountains or the jungles or the swamps or the desert or whatever the region is like. But they'll take them away so they can endure, so they can learn new skills, so they can be challenged. So, when you take a person out of their comfort zone, and then you use that to empty the cup and then pour new knowledge in, they come back a different person. And um, I think that what we're doing right now is providing the perfect atmosphere and environment for them to commune with nature. And nature is so healing, it's going to get them to relieve their stress, take a little break from their distractions. We live in the age of technology and distractions, and it is a huge issue right now. There's a war right now for your attention, right? And these young men and sisters are constantly stuck on their phones. Screen time is going up. People have very little time to just sit, chill, and just process things around them. And when we take them up to this space, they're going to have time to find themselves, time to sort through their thoughts, time to really get to know other young brothers like their own age group that they could, make connections with, lifelong connections, establishing some type of brotherhood. But just in general, just to have a place that they could go to where they could feel comfortable camping, not worry about who's looking over your shoulder, who's going to judge you, but they could just unapologetically be themselves on safe land. That's everything. So I look forward to you teaching them archery. I look forward to the hikes that we're going to do with them. I gotta get my fishing poles ready to go because I intend on catching at least something before I leave. You know how it is when you're fishing, it's hit or miss, but I'm going to catch something before we leave. And then it's always a blessing when I get the opportunity to teach yoga and breath work, right? Because I feel like those are tools that they could use with them in their everyday lives, whether it's in school or while they're dealing with difficult situations, just to be able to woosah and be able to center themselves. I think that it's just going to be a blessing, not only for those young men, but for the community as a whole.
Indeed. Indeed. So for clarity for all the listeners, the very first legacy camp that will be facilitated by the Growth Spot Collective is taking place April 5th through the 7th, 2024. We will be departing from Phoenix, Arizona, and we'll be camping at one of the state parks, Lyman State Park in Apache County, Arizona. So I think, the key piece, getting them out of the setting, um, to kind of eliminate the distraction, right? And I think all of those different activities kind of speaks to the ability to kind of alleviate some of that anxiety, confusion, camaraderie, because our neighborhoods look different now in the cities, right? So a lot of these
Yeah.
young men, they don't have, or at least my perception of it is like when I'm riding down the street, I don't see kids flooded outside in the streets hanging out, or just kind of like I don't see the neighborhood effect that I feel like was prevalent in so many of our neighborhoods, right? Where You know, I would imagine that some of these boys don't even have like mentors or people they look up to like in close proximity, right? Like
Mm-hmm.
even if you're an only child, your friend may have an elder brother or an uncle, or their father may become a father figure, that type of thing. So I think this also affords those young men those kind of opportunities. They may not, if they come from a single parent household, they may not have opportunities where they're able to just be with responsible, legitimate men, for
Mm-hmm.
an extended period of time, or even a brief period of time away from their mother or the household or their grandmother, or whoever the guardian is, if it isn't a father involved directly. So I think that in itself is powerful. You know what I mean? As
Mm-hmm.
far as like the outdoors in general, I myself, I didn't grow up camping. I just very recently got into it. So that kind of speaks to the point I made earlier about being in the infancy in some of these areas of activity. The cool thing about that is it's new to you, right? So it's exciting. As you
Right.
as you gain that knowledge, as you get more comfortable, it's just like anything else. When you first really learned how to ride that bike, you were really enthusiastic about riding it because you have some level of proficiency in it. And I liken that to this opportunity. So for anyone that's listening, and if you aren't already tapped in, we have all of our contact information down below at the ticker. If you need any additional information, the growth spot at gmail.com. You can send the questions or any concerns or anything like that. If you just want more information, you can register at the growthspot.org. Um, 20 spots. We're also going to have a meet and greet so that parents and guardians and the participants or potential participants can come and meet us. And we can kind of have a more, appropriate introduction to who we are, what we're about, what we're offering, and just kind of field the many questions that may be out there. So I would definitely encourage you to come out to that. Even if you can't make this one and you just want to learn more about what's going on, we're going to be there and happy to share that information and take suggestions. It's not like we got this perfected or mastered in any sense. It's very well thought out and calculated as far as how we're going about this to ensure that everyone's safe. Right, that's the first priority. Safety always. But I think everyone involved in the collective is very well intentioned, and we have a lot to offer. So when those young men come back home, they're definitely going to come back with some jewels to build on.
Yeah, yeah. I agree wholeheartedly. And to put a cap to that, as far as the legacy camp, and it touches on some of the things that we were talking about already. But when we get in that space with these young men, the whole process is therapy. For everybody involved, for the mentors, for the young men. You know, when we are on that land, it's going to be stress reduction. When you hike, it puts you in a relaxing mood. Your brain waves change. You're able to take deep, in full breaths and really, really be able to, just get away from that smog in the city. We're going to be camping, and that always changes a young man's mind. Most people who have been camping before, that sticks with them. They can always tell you about that memory point and how that changed them and how they look at nature differently. We're providing a situation where it'll help with mindfulness and presence. They're going to be learning skills on that land, hard skills. That concrete 101 is legit. We need to start encouraging young men to start thinking about how they can build on land. Whether we start doing fence post building, or okay, this is how you set up like a deck. We could come up with a lot of different creative activities as we continue to have more and more of these camps. But by and large, it's all about people learning just how to get rid of their anxiety and their stress. They're going to be amongst their peers. So you got that collective, you got that community belonging, right? Where they could say that I was part of the April, 2024, group of young men who went, right? Especially when we start, having some type of ritual where we have them plant a tree, right? Or do something where they they could go back years later and see that, oh, well, we did that, So that's going to be something that I definitely want to do on this trip to commemorate the experience, make sure that somewhere, even if we have to etch something in a tree, we pick a tree on the land and we say, this tree right here, we're gonna have all the young men initial in this tree to say that they were there. You know what I mean? But I think that sense of belonging matters, shared experiences. We are creating the next village, right? We're creating the next community, that bond of brotherhood, we're just creating a space so they can get together and do that so that they won't go back to the streets in Phoenix and, act like they don't know who the other person is and act like that person is a stranger, right? Immediately after that camp, they are surrounded by brothers. And, again, that's just powerful. And then not to mention, just straight up activity. You know, we're gonna be working these kids out, right? They're gonna get, the blood pumping. They won't be on the couch. Whether it's us playing tug of war or us hiking or us doing the yoga movements, the blood is gonna be moving. So this is gonna be a healthy experience overall. So I'm looking forward to it.
Yeah, I know when I went, we went. That was, and I'm in my early 40s, and that was my first time actually camping, and it was an awesome experience to be able to camp on my own land, and like just looking at the stars, and it just seems everything seemed like 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 hella surreal, and then regarding the mental health and healing, I came back feeling great. Like I can't wait to go back up there.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah, that's good, bro. I'm very excited about the opportunity to be involved in any capacity. I think we have a lot to offer, and it's the perfect type of space to kind of garner, you know, um, or I should say, gather a group of young men um, for educational purposes, number one, but more than anything else, like Brother James said, exposure, exposing them. That's the key piece, exposure. I think we can all reference a time where we were exposed to a particular activity that resonated with us and is still prevalent in some kind of way today. Even if we're not physically involved in that activity, it did something to our mentality, to our principle system. So that's key. That's key. So I'm real excited about it. Like I said, any if there's anyone out there that is looking for any more information, please reach out to us. Hopefully, you can come meet us in person at the meet and greet. Even if that's not the case, take advantage of all of our contacts via social media and email. With that said, is there anything else or any last words? Anything else we need to cover before we get out of here?
I got a question for Brother
Yes.
James, if I
Okay.
may.
Okay.
Um, like camping, hiking, and farming, or camping and farming. Um, a lot of them, the brothers and sisters may think like it's a lost art, but it's really not a lost art when let's just say as fast as close as 60, 70 years ago. It's really not that far fetched to where everybody had to farm. If you didn't farm, you didn't eat.
Oh
Uh,
yeah.
so how can we make that popular again, as far as making, like, as far as the Kalon, we always bring up that point, like sometimes we don't have to do shit until we have to do shit. You understand what I'm saying? Like, say the
Yeah.
grocery stores closed and or something happened, and now we gotta learn how to do this shit. So how
Hmm.
can we get ahead of the game, if you understand what I'm saying, and make it more
No.
popular
Yeah.
to where like we're doing this on our own, so that way when shit do get squiggly, we already hip to the game. We already know what we got to do, and we're
Right.
already in motion. I think we need
Right.
to be, as a people, focused on that, because this food is killing us already. So we need to figure out something else.
Nah. That's well said. And to your point. you already touched on it. It's all about exposure. This is not something that is a lost art at all. There are people right now, all over this country, especially in the South, on the East Coast, where there's black farmers everywhere, everywhere. And we have our specific way that we tend to work with the soil and grow and work with the plants, right? We have our own divine way that we do that. And it's about reclaiming that lost art in the cities. But in certain areas, it's not lost at all. This is something that's passed down. It's just that for for decades, if not centuries, we've all been siloed in our own communities, right? We've been in our own towns, our own villages, our own area. And when information is passed down, it's passed down to that little small ecosystem. But this is the age of social media. This is the age of information. It's just that most of the people who are on that path are not thinking that they need to have a live stream and share that information to encourage other people to get into that space, to show how easy it is to just put one foot in front of the other and work with other brothers and sisters around you that are thinking the same to do it. Like most people are not thinking that they need to share that information. They're thinking, okay, I just need to pass that on to my son or my daughter or my neighbor. So they're only thinking locally, but what we're doing is really trying to bring everybody in and make it a movement, right? We know that this is going to help not only economically, but spiritually and physically and mentally for our people. So we got a lot of different reasons of why we're putting all this energy into the growth spot, in particular for the legacy camp. Everything is for the future. I mean, when we say legacy, that has a lot of meanings. We're not playing around with the word legacy. And if everybody was thinking in terms of the collective spirit as opposed to the competitive spirit, then we will all be going out of our way to grab every brother and sisters we can to share this information and to document your journey along the way, because it's not like we know everything. It's not like we have it all figured out. We are determined to get it done. And as we are going through our process, we are sharing that with everybody to witness. And we can learn from other people. And that's another call to action I was going to jump on with Brother Kylon. He was telling everybody how places they could go. I also want to remind everyone, if you want to volunteer and assist what we're doing, we could use your resource. If you have a skill set, if you have access, if you have funding, and you want to be able to contribute to what we're doing here so that we can expand, all that information is on the website. There's forms you can fill out for volunteerism or just knowing what the next thing on the horizon is for our projects. So we want this for our people in general, especially if you're here in Arizona. We're building this for you and your family and all of our families. So love.
Yeah, that was
Indeed.
dope. Yeah, that's dope. Any closing words, anybody? Any more questions?
I would say this because you were talking to the sense of urgency that our demographic, especially, that we tend to lack,
Mm-hmm.
considering the circumstances. Like we don't necessarily do things that we probably should be doing when we don't have to. I think that's a valid statement. I kind of speak to that quite a bit. And I think for whatever reason, some of us kind of rely on our innate ability to innovate. We've done that, and our ancestors have done that for some time now. But I do think we're in the age of technological advancement, and it's putting us closer to a point where those kind of like last minute opportunities to pivot are becoming less and less available. So in a sense, the hourglass is running out on us in terms of making those last minute adjustments. So we definitely got to be more proactive. So it's really just a matter of prioritization because we have the resources, we have the opportunity, the information is out there if you seek it, and then in some instances, due to social media, sometimes it literally falls in your lap. just due to the algorithm. You know what I mean? You could like a post and the algorithm can just drop a bomb on you. And it's like, wow,
Mm-hmm.
where'd this come from? So that's a privilege as well. So we just got to be on it. You know what I mean? We just got to be sharper in our intention and be proactive and, just get out there and, not be overly concerned with making those mistakes or feeling uncomfortable. Those uncomfortable spaces, that's where the growth is.
Right.
So you got
Right.
to lean into that.
Yeah, that's dope. Dope answer, bro. Dope, man. Brother James, you got to come on again, man. You got to come drop the jewels. I'll change it to
Well,
Thursdays for you, man. You know what I'm saying? So
yeah. And you know what? Unfortunately, yeah, I teach, martial arts on Wednesday evening, so I haven't been able to make it before. But because we're doing today, I'd love to jump in and have dialogue with each of you brothers, man. It's always special. So, for my closing note, um, I think it's perfect to go over what the acronym Legacy stands for, because I think a lot about what we touched on tonight, it strikes home with almost each and every one of them. So L stands for what? Leadership, right? Developing skills, the qualities necessary to guide others. We're learning leadership as we go along this process. The E stands for empowerment. We are empowering ourselves to reach our full potential. And that is in so many different ways, however you want to look at it. And then G stands for growth. We are growing communities. We are growing ourselves personally, professionally. We're learning skills, and we're growing the village with these young men. A stands for achievement. Setting the goals that we set forth together as a collective that's going to empower this community. That's big. And C, community. We are building and maintaining strong and supportive relationships that can live on well beyond us. After we pass away, I expect this to be passed on to our seeds, and then for them to carry it on and push the mission forward. And then lastly, wise for you. There's going to be uh, positive results and outcomes from all of our efforts, and everyone's going to benefit from it eventually. So that's what legacy stands for, and I think that this particular podcast touched on that.
for sure. For sure. Until next time, brothers and sisters, man, we'll be right back at you every week. Make sure you like, share the video, subscribe, man, put somebody on to it. Get your peoples together, man. Think about getting some land and then watch the podcast. Peace and blessings.
Peace.
Peace.